Hey, what's up guys? This is the Daily Bit with a Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be going over how to make a pottery bowl. This is a pretty cool little tutorial that basically the modeling is nothing to write home about. It's pretty easy to get this type of shape in Blender, but what we're really going to be focusing on is the UV unwrapping part of Blender. So as you'll see here, I have loaded up kind of like the final version of the bowl that I just showed you. And I took a photograph of the top and bottom of the bowl and loaded that in as a texture map. So that's what we'll be moving towards, to get to the end of the tutorial. So we're going to start with a new scene. And the first thing we do is we're going to press delete and we're going to take out this cube. I'm going to switch to my side view and I'm going to zoom in a little bit and I'm going to create a Bezier curve. And it doesn't start at the facing that we want to, so I rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. And I'm going to rotate it one more time like so along the y-axis, and I'm going to move it up just a little bit. And then I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I'm just going to kind of move this over a little bit like so. Now what we're doing here is we're creating what is sort of like a cross-section of the pottery bowl. So this curve here that you see is going to be kind of like the side of the bowl, and we also need to create a bottom for it. So as we pull this out a little bit, now what we should see is, I'm not sure why it doesn't display that other line there, but what we're seeing here is going to be what the side of the bowl looks like. We're going to move that to the center point, and the next thing we probably want to do is probably change this orientation. So we're going to come over here to origin. We're going to change the origin to the 3D cursor. And then when we spin this with our screw modifier, it's going to spin it along the center part there that we just set up. So we're going to go over to add modifier. We're going to put on a screw modifier, and right away we can see it's not really quite working the way we would expect it to. So we're going to change the axis to the x-axis, and now we can see we have what constitutes a bowl. You can also see that the segments here are very noticeable, so we're going to pop this up by quite a bit. I'm going to make it, I don't know, I think I'm going to make it like 300. I think that should be good for now. Okay, and the next thing that you'll notice is that the bowl is like wafer thin. So I'm going to come over to, actually I think I'll, instead of beveling it, which I could do, yeah, see that's going to do some strange things. So instead of beveling it, first thing I'm going to do is increase the curve resolution by bring it up to about 50. And what that does is, I'm going to zoom in here on the side so you can see. If I bring this down to something really noticeable, like 5, this resolution for the curve is how you're going to increase the resolution on this side. So at first, with our screw modifier, we wanted to increase the resolution all the way around the bowl, and this, by comparison, increases the side curve. So we have our bowl now, and now we're going to put on another modifier called solidify. Now, solidifier does exactly what it sounds like. It increases the thickness of the curve. So now we have something that's starting to look like a pottery bowl. The last thing I would say about this is I'm just going to kind of even this up. This doesn't really matter too much. I'm just kind of a stickler for keeping things lined up. So I'm going to align that with the grid. Okay, so we have our modeling done of the clay bowl, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply a new material. So I'm going to click new. It doesn't really matter what you make this color, you can leave it by the default, because the next thing we're going to do is come over and add a new texture. Now, texturing in Blender, if you guys are familiar with the cycles rendering, it's going to be completely different than this. I should have made to mention that this is for the Blender render, which is the original rendering engine. So the first thing we're going to do is add a texture. I'm actually going to refrain from loading the texture over here right now. First off, I'm going to split this view. So I'm going to right click in this little area down here, and I'm going to left click on split area. Over here, I'm going to change this to the UV image editor. And what this editor does is it's basically like a two-dimensional version of polygons that you can extract from of your 3D object. So what we really need to do is we need to go in and we're not going to actually be able to select the polygon faces right now because it's still a curve. So the first thing we do before we're going to actually unwrap it, and if this was a mesh already you wouldn't have to go through this step, but since we started with a curve we're going to have to convert it to a mesh. And we can't apply these modifiers just yet because we'll get an error message here. It says cannot apply constructive modifiers to curve, and same here. So we need to create a mesh out of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Option or Alt if you're on a PC, and I'm going to go Option C. It brings up this little menu. It says Curve from Mesh or Mesh from Curve. We're going to select the second one since we started with a curve, and now we're going to turn it into a mesh. And now if I tab into my edit mode, you can see that I have polygons that I can select. So this is very helpful for UV unwrapping. This is exactly what we want to move towards. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to press the C key, and what that's going to allow us to do, I have the setting a little bit too large there, it looks like. So I'm going to press that C key again, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel down to where I can adjust the size of this selection tool. So C key is basically like a selection tool that instead of like if you press the B key it's a border select. This C key basically what it does is it allows you to select like an area. So right now I've selected the top of the bowl, okay, and as you can see here it hasn't selected anything else, so that's exactly what we want. Okay, so we're going to project from view, which means that whichever way I look at this piece, it's going to project from that view. So if I project from this way, you can see over here, it projected literally that same view. It's really not what we want though. We want a top-down view. Okay, so I'm going to come back here after I undo, and I'm going to project from view. Coming over here, it looks like towards the center, maybe we don't have all that selected. Yep, as I'm zooming in here I can see that. And yeah, okay, as I suspected, there was a few that we didn't get, so that's okay. We're going to come back over and we're going to undo that just for a second. We're going to zoom in and make sure we get every single face on there. So as I'm left clicking here, I'm selecting all those additional faces. I'm going to get in even closer, and I'm going to make sure that I can get as many as I possibly can. I'm going to zoom back out, and then I'm going to rotate a little bit around, and let's see here, I'm going to get all these. This can be a little bit tedious depending on, you know, the complexity of the mesh that you're working on, but it's worth it in the end because you want something that's exact. So I'm just going along the edge here, and I'm selecting all these remaining vertices that got missed by the top-down approach that I originally took. And so we're getting to the end here, and I just have a few more to go, I think. And coincidentally, you know, I think when we make a mesh like this and you're learning about UV unwrapping, it's good to start with something that's fairly simple, because the more the more complexity of the mesh that you encounter, obviously this can get quite tedious to go through and select all these. So it's good to familiarize yourself with very simple geometry when you're starting out. So that's why I chose this bowl. It might not be the most interesting of shapes, but it gives you an idea of what you're trying to accomplish. When you select all these faces and you go around and you look at it and you realize that, you know, it's pretty easy to miss a few here and there. Now, would one or two of these really make a huge difference? Well, maybe not, but it's good to try and get every single one of them in there and make sure that you're exact as possible. So I think we're coming to the end here. I think I have them all. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my top view. I'm going to press the U key for unwrap. I'm going to project from view. So this brings this same element over here, and this is a two-dimensional representation of what we see over here. And just so I can select multiple groups, if I need to come back and select this again, I'm going to create a vertex group. This is over in our object data tab, and I'm going to assign this first one. I'm going to name this, let's see, top and inside of bowl, and then I'm going to assign that to those faces. And I'm going to go to select, and I'm going to inverse, and I'm going to create another one where we're going to do this outside of bowl. I'm going to assign it to that. And so the next thing is I'm going to come down here to the bottom part of it. So I'm going to hold, I should say what I'm doing here. I'm going to hold Control and hit number 7 on my number pad. And now I'm on the bottom. And same thing, I'm going to unwrap, project from view. And I'm going to bring this over a little bit like that. And let's see. Now we have both projected over here. This is exactly what we want. We want to see both of these. So on my right view, I selected both the top and the bottom. Okay, and you can see they both come up. Now, if I just select one of them, then it only selects one of them over here. So this is kind of good to set up if you're going to do a lot of complex mapping, because you want to be able to select vertex groups rather than going through that tedious process of manually selecting them all. So I'm just going to go ahead and highlight those both again. So one of the last steps we need to do is actually add our image, and I've created a map already. If you're familiar with Photoshop, you should kind of already know how to set this up. I've created a map, and I'm just going to move these out of the way for a second so you can see what the map looks like. Okay, so on the left we have our top side of the bowl, and on the bottom, or excuse me, on the right we have the bottom part of the bowl. So I'm going to line these up, and then I'm going to deselect both of them by pressing the A key, and then I'm going to do a border select with the B key. And now I'm going to scale this one up just a little bit so it kind of matches up as close as I can get it. This bowl is not perfectly circular, but we'll just get it as close as we can. And I'm going to select the other one and scale it up just a bit. Okay, so we're getting close. The last thing we need to do is we're going to come back over to our texture tab, and we're going to open a texture, because right now it is using the UV map setting, okay, but we need to put that same texture that we loaded actually onto here, and we should be able to see it if we go to the rendered view. Okay, so we have that set up now. We can see the bowl is pretty much, behaving like we would think it would, based off of what these are set up. And just to kind of elaborate and show you how this works, if I move this, say like down here, see how it shifts it over here? So I just wanted to show you guys that you can kind of directly monitor it, how you're setting it up. Or let's say you didn't like the way it looked and you wanted to just rotate it a little bit, you could do that as well. That's pretty much it, what I wanted to show you with this tutorial. I guess the last few remaining touches is you could add a few more lights to kind of brighten things up a bit. You could add a few underneath it. And I think maybe the last thing is that the specular color on this is a little bit messed up looking. By default, you don't really have a shiny looking bowl at this point. So we're going to come down here to our specular, and we're going to change this to Verdiso. And we're going to bring our slope down quite a bit, and we're going to bring down our intensity by quite a bit. And we should be getting close. Bring down this slope even more. Maybe bring the intensity up a little bit. Could go the other way, I guess. Somewhere around in there. That's starting to look a little bit glossier. Yeah, somewhere around there. Okay, so we have our bowl and we have our texture applied, and it's looking nice and glossy. Okay guys, I just want to say, hey, if you like these videos, make sure to click that like button. Let me know in the comments section what you'd like me to do next in terms of a tutorial. If there's something you've been wondering about how you should do it in Blender, make it a note to put a comment in the section down below to let me know. If you like these videos, subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate that. So until next time guys, peace. Have a good one.